Well, good morning, friends, and welcome. Welcome to Hyde Park United Methodist 9 a.m. weekday devotions. I'm Sally Campbell-Evans, and it is great to start this day with you on Wednesday, August the 26th. This morning, I want to tell you about someone who's made a big impression in my life. But not just on my life, really on our whole family, especially our children. His name is David Lamont. He's a dad, a spouse, a poet, a preacher's kid, a folk singer, songwriter, a peace activist, and an incredibly kind and insightful soul. I remember I was going to one of his concerts back in 2006, and I asked our daughter Abby to join me. Now, what 13-year-old chooses to go to a concert with their mother, right? Our musical tastes were kind of different in those days, but I said, just trust me. I think you'll like him. Well, she went, and she did like him. And at the end of the concert, she wanted to get his autograph. And she told him that she wanted to learn to play the guitar better. And with that, he handed her one of his guitars and said, "Do you want to play something on this for me?" Abby has been singing and playing David's songs ever since. Then in 2008, David accepted a Rotary World Peace Fellowship to study international relations and peace and conflict resolution at the University of Queensland in Australia. And when he returned, all three of our then high school age kids heard him speak at a church conference. And the next thing I know, one of our boys, I think it was Zach, was interviewing David about a paper on peacemaking. Through the years, we've stayed in touch off and on, seeing each other at conferences or writing on each other's Facebook pages. And so today I wanted to introduce you to David by reading one of his children's books. It's a book that's based on a true story of something that happened in 2007 in Tennessee. In light of all the tension and conflict that exist in our current historical moment, this story, White Flower, is an important tale. And maybe, just maybe, the days are coming. No, I think maybe they are already here, when we are called, each of us, to meet hate with humor and love. By the way, David's pretty excited that I'm sharing his story with the Hyde Park family this morning. So, White Flower. The day was bright and sunny, as most May days tend to be, in the hills of Appalachia, down in Knoxville, Tennessee. A dozen men put on their suits and quickly took their places. In white robes, those tall and pointed hoods that hid their faces. Their feet fell down in rhythm as they started their parade. They raised their fist into the air, they bellowed and they brayed. They loved to stir the people up. They loved when they were taunted. They didn't mind the anger. It's exactly what they wanted. As they came around the corner, sure enough, the people roared, but they couldn't quite believe their ears. It seemed to be support. Had Knoxville finally seen the light? Were people coming round? The men thought for a moment they'd found their kind of town. But then they turned their eyes to where the cheering had its source. As one, their shoulders crumpled when they saw the mighty force. The crowd had painted faces, and some had tacky clothes. Their hair and hats outrageous, each had a bright red nose. The clowns had come in numbers to enjoy the grand parade. They laughed and danced and joined the clowns who had come to town that day. And then the marchers shouted, and the clowns all strained to hear. Each one tuned in intently with a hand cupped to his ear. "White power!" screamed the marchers as they raised their fisted hands. The clowns leaned in and listened like they couldn't understand. And then one held up his finger and helped all the others see the point of all this yelling, and they joined right in with glee. "White flower!" the clowns shouted, and they reached inside their clothes. They pulled out bags and tore them, and huge clouds of powder rose. They poured it on each other, and they threw it in the air. They got all over baggy clothes and multicolored hair. Now, All but just a few of them were joining in the jokes. You could almost see the marchers turning red beneath white cloaks. They wanted to look scary. They wanted to look tough. One rushed right at the clowns in rage and was hauled off in cuffs. But the others chanted louder, marching on around the bend. The clouds all marched on too, of course, supporting their new friends. White power, came the marchers' cry. They were not amused. The clowns grew still and thoughtful. Well, perhaps they'd been confused. They huddled and consulted this bright and silly crowd. They listened quite intently. Then one said, "I've got it now." "White flowers!" screamed the happy clown, and all the rest joined in. The air was filled with flowers, and they laughed and danced again. Everyone loves flowers, and white's a pretty sort. I can't think of a better cause for people to support. Green flower stems went flying like small arrows from bad archers, and white petals covered everything, including the mad marchers. And then a very tall clown called the others to attention. He choked down all his chuckles and said, "Friends, I have to mention that what with all this mirth and fun, it's sort of hard to hear, but now I know the cause that these paraders hold so dear." "Tight showers," the clown blurted as he hit his head in wonder. He held up a camp shower and all the others got under. Or at least they tried to get beneath. They strained but couldn't quite. There wasn't room for all of them. They pushed, but it was tight. "White power," came the mad refrain, quite carefully pronounced. The clowns consulted one another, and then a woman pronounced, "I've got it. I'm embarrassed that it took so long to see, but what these marchers call for is a cause that's dear to me." "Wife power," she exclaimed, and all the other clowns joined in. They shook their heads and laughed at how erroneous they'd been. The women clowns were hoisted up on shoulders of the others, and some pulled on wedding dresses, chanting, "Here's to wives and mothers." The men in robes were sullen. They knew they'd been defeated. They yelled a few more times, and then they finally retreated. And when they'd gone, a kind policeman turned to all the clowns and offered them an escort through the center of town. The day was bright and sunny, as most May days tend to be, in the hills of Appalachia, down in Knoxville, Tennessee. People joined the new parade. The crowd stretched out for miles. The clowns passed out flowers and made everybody smile. And what would be the lesson of that shiny southern day? Can we understand the message that the clowns sought to convey? It seems that when you're fighting hatred, hatred's not the things to use. So here's to those who march on in their big red floppy shoes. Friends, on May the 26th, 2007, members of a white supremacist hate group came to Knoxville, Tennessee from out of state to hold a rally in a public park. The counter-protesters chose not to shout angry words back, but rather meet hate with humor. The Ku Klux Clowns, as they're called, had prepared well, and they had rehearsed, and all those misunderstandings that the clouds chanted in the poem, well, actually, they were part of their shenanigans that day. In reflecting on it, David says that beyond the mere facts, there is a lot of truth in this story. And the truth is that there are more than two ways to respond to aggression. Fight or flight is what we often do, but there is a third way. If we can be creative enough to find ways to disarm hatred without either retreating or yielding to hatred ourselves, we often find more constructive outcomes could become possible. He admits that clown actions may not always be the best way to respond, but It worked that day. What we need is creativity and a refusal to become that which we abhor. As Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. And hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. In Matthew's Gospel, Jesus says, "You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Pray for them and find creative ways to love them." Will you pray with me? This day, oh God, we ask that you would help us show up with our best creative selves, with renewed energy to bring your love and light and hope and peace and justice into this world, even if our knees are shaking. This is our prayer. We ask in your name. Amen. Friends, if you want to hear some of David's songs, go to davidlamott.com. And if you want to hear him read this book himself or learn more about this book and other resources, go to whiteflowerbook.com. I really hope you have a great day, and it's been fun starting it with you. So long.